No, please, someone help me. I can't do this.
She was on her knees, the Georgia sun pressed down like a punishment from the sky itself. The concrete beneath Zara Coleman's knees was hot enough to brand skin, and sweat ran freely down the back of her neck, soaking into the collar of her perfectly pressed Harrington Academy uniform. Around her, students moved in every direction, some pretending not to see her, some stealing glances, some outright stopping to stare like she was a display in a museum. Look at the scholarship girl. Kneeling in the dirt where she belongs, Mr. Raymond Cole stood about 10 feet away with his arms folded across his chest and his chin slightly lifted, the posture of a man who had decided, long before this moment, that Zara Coleman needed to be put in her place. He wasn't watching her with anger. That would have been easier to take. He was watching her with satisfaction. The quiet, practiced satisfaction of someone who had done this before and planned to do it again. Zara stared at a crack in the concrete between her hands. She focused on it like it was the most important thing in the world. Her jaw was clenched so tight her teeth ached. Her vision blurred just once, and she blinked it back hard. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of these people. But somewhere deep in her chest, a voice was screaming, how did it come to this? How did the best day of my life turn into this? Great question. Because just 5 months ago, Zara Coleman was standing in her mother's kitchen in the south side of Atlanta, holding a letter with shaking hands while Linda Coleman, her mother, her rock, her whole world, stood across the kitchen counter with both hands pressed over her mouth and tears running silently down her face. Full academic scholarship. Harrington Academy. One of the most elite private schools in the entire state of Georgia. Linda had pulled Zara into a hug so tight it cracked her back. Then she'd pulled away and grabbed Zara's face in both hands and said, through happy tears, I always knew. Baby, I always knew. That was 5 months ago. And now Zara was on her knees on a concrete courtyard while rich kids walked past her like she was part of the landscaping. So, how exactly did we get here? Let's go back to the beginning. Because this story, Zara Coleman's story, is one of the most real, most raw, most emotionally complicated stories you are ever going to hear. It's about what happens when a brilliant girl walks into a world that was never built for her. It's about the people who try to break her and the one person who refuses to let them. It's about loyalty, cruelty, identity, and the kind of strength that only gets forged under fire. Stay with me. Because this is just the beginning. August 22nd, first day of senior year. Zara's 18th birthday. She stood in front of the small bathroom mirror in their apartment on the south side, adjusting the collar of her uniform. The uniform was from the school's resale program, gently used, her mother had said cheerfully, which was a kind way of saying second-hand. But Linda had washed and ironed it until it looked sharp. She'd even polished Zara's school shoes the night before. Zara looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. She had her mother's dark, warm eyes, deep brown, the kind that caught light in unexpected ways. But she had her father's lighter complexion, her father's loose, natural curls that fell just past her shoulders. Mixed. That's what people said when they looked at her and couldn't quite place her. What are you mixed with? Like she was a recipe they were trying to figure out. Her father, a white man named Robert Chambers, who had been charming and present right up until Zara was 6 years old, and then simply wasn't, had left behind exactly 2 things. Those curls and a hollow space in Zara's chest that she had learned to build walls around. She didn't think about him often. She had taught herself not to. She picked up her backpack, second-hand, but clean, and walked out to the kitchen where Linda was already dressed for her early shift at Mercy General Hospital, where she worked as a nursing aide. There was a card propped against a glass of orange juice on the counter. Happy 18th birthday, my brilliant, beautiful, complicated girl. Go show them exactly who you are. The world isn't ready. Love, Mom. Zara read it twice, pressed it to her chest for a second. Then she folded it carefully and slipped it into the front pocket of her backpack. Be home by 7, Linda said, grabbing her keys. She stopped at the door and turned back. Her eyes moved over her daughter, the uniform, the backpack, the curls she'd pinned back neatly, and her expression did something complicated. Proud and scared and hopeful all at the same time. You earned this, Zara, she said quietly. Every single bit of it. Don't let anyone make you forget that. Zara nodded. I won't. Linda left. Zara finished her juice, grabbed her backpack, and walked out into a warm Atlanta morning to catch the city bus to the best school in the state. Harrington Academy sat behind iron gates on the north side of the city like it had been placed there specifically to remind everyone on the south side that distance was about more than just miles. Red brick buildings, tall arched windows, perfectly manicured lawns where not a single blade of grass seemed to be out of order. A circular driveway where luxury vehicles rolled in and out in a slow, comfortable parade. Zara came off the city bus. She stood at the gate for just a moment, backpack on her shoulders, looking in. Then she straightened her spine, something she did often, a physical act of deciding, and walked through. The hallways were loud and comfortable in the way that only rich kids can be loud and comfortable, like the whole building was theirs by birthright. They moved in clusters, laughing, shoes clicking against marble, expensive things catching the morning light. Nobody looked at Zara. Not because she was invisible, she was far from invisible, but because looking would require acknowledging her, and acknowledging her would require placing her, and placing her didn't quite compute. She found her classroom, chose a seat in the middle, not too eager, not too far back, and pressed her backpack against her knees. That's when Mr. David Morgan walked in. He didn't make an entrance. He just arrived, set his folder on the desk, uncapped his marker, and looked out at the room with a calm, assessing gaze. He was tall, broad-shouldered, probably late 30s, dark-skinned, clean-shaven, wearing a charcoal gray blazer that had clearly been pressed that morning. He had the kind of face that had probably been handsome in a softer way once, but years and purpose had sharpened it into something more serious. "Business studies," he said. His voice was unhurried. "I don't repeat myself, I don't chase students, and I don't give grades people haven't earned." A pause. "But if you show up, if you do the work, if you're willing to be challenged, I will go to bat for you every single time." Zara thought, okay, I like this man. That feeling lasted about 9 minutes, because that's when Mr. Morgan posed a question to the class. A sharp, layered question about competitive market analysis, the kind of question that required not just reading but thinking. He looked around the room. Nobody moved. Zara actually knew the answer. She'd spent part of her summer reading ahead, partly out of excitement and partly because she'd been terrified of showing up unprepared. But she was new, and she was aware of how she looked in this room, the girl from the south side with the second-hand uniform, and she did not want to be that student. The one who waves her hand around on day one and makes everyone look at her. So she stayed quiet. Mr. Morgan's expression cooled slightly. He began moving through the rows, asking each student one by one. And the catch, the thing that made the whole classroom go tense, was that a wrong answer earned you a sharp, swift knock of 2 knuckles against the top of your head. Not brutal, but firm. Humiliating in the particular way that things are humiliating when they happen in front of an audience. One by one, students flinched. The classroom filled with that specific dread, the kind that gets worse the closer the threat gets to you. Then he reached Zara. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. She hadn't been in any of his previous lessons. She had no context for the framework he'd built the question around. She gave an answer. It was thoughtful. It was reasonable. It just wasn't the specific answer he was looking for. The knock came. It was sharp. It sent a jolt through her skull, and the surprise of it, the suddenness of it, on this day of all days in this place where she already felt so achingly out of place, hit something deep. Zara didn't just tear up, she broke. Her shoulders heaved. Her breath came out in a broken sound she couldn't swallow back. She pressed both hands over her face, but the sobs came anyway, real, unguarded, ugly beautiful in the way that real grief always is. The classroom went absolutely still. A few students nearby shifted uncomfortably. A girl Zara didn't know yet placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Others looked at the floor. Mr. Morgan stood very still, something moving behind his eyes, unreadable but present. He studied her for a moment. Then, without a single word, he turned and walked out of the classroom. A few minutes later, a boy appeared at the door. "Zara, Mr. Morgan wants you in the staff room." Every head in the room turned toward her. Zara pulled in a slow breath through her nose. She wiped her face with her sleeve. She stood up. She walked out. The staff room felt smaller than she expected. Mr. Morgan was seated at his desk when she appeared at the doorway. He looked up. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She sat, her hands folded in her lap. Stared somewhere between her knees and the floor. "Why are you still crying?" he asked. Not harsh, not cold, just direct. Zara was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the window. She made a decision. "Today is my birthday," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "It's my first day at this school." She swallowed. "I thought it would feel different. I thought I would feel welcome." She pressed one hand flat against her chest. "The knock didn't just hurt here." She touched the side of her head lightly. It hurt here. Room went very quiet. Mr. Morgan looked at her, really looked at her, the way teachers sometimes do when they suddenly see past the student to the actual human being sitting in front of them. He had not known she was new. He had assumed, and he was not a man who liked discovering his assumptions, that she had attended his previous lessons like everyone else. He exhaled. Slowly, deliberately. Then he reached into the small refrigerator beside his desk, pulled out a cold bottle of juice and set it on the desk in front of her without ceremony. Happy birthday, Zara, he said quietly. I owe you an apology. I didn't know it was your first day. That's my failure, not yours. She stared at the bottle. And for what it's worth, he continued, his voice returning to its usual measured tone, the answer you gave wasn't wrong. It just wasn't the framework I was looking for. Which means you've been thinking about this material independently. He paused. That's not a weakness. That's actually impressive. The smallest, most fragile smile broke across Zara's face. Thank you, sir, she whispered. Go back to class, he said. And Zara, next time you know an answer, you say it. You don't make yourself small for anyone in that room. Understood, she nodded. She picked up the juice. She walked out. For the first time since she'd stepped through those iron gates that morning, something in her chest quietly unclenched. If you're already feeling something right now, good. Hold on to that feeling. Because this story is about to take you somewhere you are not fully prepared for. Before we go further, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now and tap that notification bell. This is a story you are going to want to follow all the way through. Now let's keep going. 2 weeks passed. Zara found her footing slowly. She memorized hallways and mapped the invisible social geography of Harrington Academy. Who sat where, who had power, who pretended to have it. She figured out which water fountain actually got cold, which staircase was fastest between second and third period, and which teachers asked real questions versus which ones just wanted to hear their own answers fed back to them. And she made exactly one friend, Jasmine Brooks. Jasmine was the kind of human being who seemed constitutionally incapable of letting silence sit for more than 30 seconds. She was sharp, funny, relentlessly loyal, and had apparently decided on day 3 that Zara Coleman was her person, and that was simply that. She sat 2 rows behind Zara in English class, and on the 4th day she leaned forward and whispered, Okay, I need to know, do you actually understand what Mrs. Patterson is saying right now, or are you just nodding and hopping for the best? Because I've been nodding for 20 minutes and I have retained absolutely zero information. Zara had laughed. A real laugh, surprised out of her before she could decide whether to let it out. Send you my notes, she whispered back. Love you, Jasmine said immediately. That's it, we're best friends now, this is not a discussion. Zara shook her head slowly, still smiling. Okay, Jasmine repeated, satisfied, and turned back to the front like that was that. And it was. But even with Jasmine, Harrington Academy carried a particular heaviness for Zara. She was the scholarship student. She was mixed race in a school where the black students thought she was too light to really understand their experience, and the white students looked at her curls and her zip code and quietly filed her under different. She existed in the middle of things, not fully claimed by either side, not fully comfortable anywhere. It was a feeling she'd carried most of her life, honestly. She had just hoped this place might be different. It wasn't. And then, about 3 weeks after school began, her body staged its own rebellion. The stomach pain started slowly, a dull, persistent ache that she ignored because she was Zara Coleman and she didn't have time for inconvenience. Then it got sharper. Then one night it became absolutely unbearable, and Linda came home from her late shift to find Zara hunched over on the bathroom floor, pale and shaking. The clinic said it was a serious internal issue. They needed to run more tests. Zara needed rest. She missed 3 days of school on the 2nd day of her absence in the middle of first period business studies. Mr. Morgan paused mid-sentence. His eyes swept the room with their usual quiet efficiency. They landed on an empty desk. He looked at it for just a moment longer than normal. Where is Zara Coleman? He asked. A boy named Tyler looked up. She's been out sick, sir, since Monday. Heard it was something with her stomach. Mr. Morgan turned back to the board. He didn't write anything for several seconds. Something about that empty seat bothered him in a way he couldn't fully explain and didn't try to. He had other students. He had a full class, but something about the girl who had sat in the middle of his classroom on her 18th birthday and cried with her whole body, something about her absence felt wrong. He sent a message through a student to find Jasmine Brooks. Jasmine appeared at his door during the break, one eyebrow raised, arms folded, head tilted at a very specific angle that clearly communicated she was already forming opinions. "Zara," he said simply. "Is she okay?" Jasmine studied him for a beat, then two. "She's resting at home, stomach issues, her mom's with her." She paused. "She should be back in a few days." "Good," he said, "then tell her when she returns to come find me before class." Jasmine nodded slowly. "Okay, sir." She turned to leave. Then she glanced back once, just once, with an expression that was somewhere between curious and thoughtful. She didn't say what she was thinking, but she was definitely thinking something when Zara came back. She walked through the school gates looking like someone had wrung her out and hung her up to dry. She was thinner. The brightness in her eyes was dialed down. She moved more carefully, like she was still listening to her body to make sure it wasn't going to betray her again. She went straight to the staff room. Mr. Morgan was at his desk, reviewing papers, when she appeared in the doorway. He looked up. He took in the full picture of her in one quiet glance. The tiredness, the effort it was taking her just to stand there and look okay. Zara walked in. And before she could organize her words or decide what to say, she just stepped forward and hugged him. The way you hug someone when you've been scared and exhausted, and the sight of a familiar face just completely overrides your composure. The hug of a student who trusted her mentor completely and wasn't thinking about anything except that she was glad to be back in a place that had one person in it who actually saw her. "Good morning, sir," she said, her voice muffled. "I'm back, Mr. Morgan patted her back briefly, firmly, the way a mentor does. "I can see that." He stepped back and looked at her properly. "You need to eat more and stop burning yourself out. Rest is not weakness." "That going to be on the exam?" Zara asked. "Extra credit," he said. She smiled. The real kind. Across the staff room, two teachers had been watching, and they were not smiling misses. Patricia Holt had been at Harrington Academy for 11 years. She was precise, controlled, and observant in the way that people are observant when they're looking for things to be wrong about. She watched Mr. Morgan's interactions with Zara with the kind of attention that transformed ordinary moments into evidence. She noticed the seat scanning when Zara was absent. She noticed the quiet words after class. She noticed the hug that morning, brief, innocent, and completely within the bounds of normal human decency, and she turned it over in her mind and filed it somewhere dark. That afternoon, Zara was walking toward the gate when she heard her name. "Zara." She turned. Mrs. Holt stood beneath the large oak near the entrance, arms folded, voice carefully controlled. "Come here." Zara walked over, already sensing something tight in the air. Mrs. Holt kept her voice low. "I'm going to say this once. It hasn't even been a month since you started here and people are already talking about you and Mr. Morgan." She held Zara's gaze steady. "The closeness, the office visits, the contact, it doesn't look right, it doesn't look appropriate. And in this school, appearances matter. I'm telling you this for your own good. That relationship needs to stop." Air went still. Zara looked at this woman who had never once spoken to her, helped her, defended her, or so much as smiled in her direction since she arrived at Harrington. And here she was now, delivering warnings about the one teacher who had shown her basic human decency. Something in Zara's chest went very quiet and very clear. "Ma'am," she said. Her voice was steady, level, unhurried. "Mr. Morgan has been a good mentor to me. He checks on my progress, he challenges my thinking, and he has treated me with respect since day one." She met the woman's eyes without blinking. "That's what good teachers do, and with all due respect, I don't think that's something I should be warned away from." She held the gaze for exactly one more beat, then she turned and walked toward the gate. Mrs. Holt watched her go. She had expected the scholarship girl to crumble. She had expected apologies and nervous nodding, and the particular kind of smallness that certain people expected from girls like Zara Coleman. She had not expected that spine. And that unbending, unhurried, quiet confidence was what made Mrs. Patricia Holt decide that Zara Coleman was a problem that needed to be handled the next few weeks at Harrington, turned cold in the way that social climates turn cold. Not all at once, but in small, accumulating ways that are hard to name individually, but impossible to miss collectively. Tables that suddenly had no room. Group projects where her name got left off the communication thread. Teachers who returned her exams with red marks on answers she knew were correct. The cafeteria falling slightly quieter when she walked in. Jasmine, to her eternal credit, responded to all of this with creative fury. When a girl named Brittany made a pointed comment about Zara's bus commute, Jasmine turned to her with an expression of pure, polite devastation and said, "Honey, the city bus has a better track record than your GPA. Sit down." Brittany did not have a comeback. Zara shook her head slowly. "You can't keep doing that." "Watch me," Jasmine said, unwrapping her sandwich. But even Jasmine's glorious, unhinged loyalty couldn't cancel out the weight of walking into a place every single day that had decided quietly, collectively, that you were too much or not enough or simply wrong in ways it couldn't be bothered to explain. Zara responded to all of it the same way she'd responded to everything hard in her life. She worked. She studied with the kind of focus that made time disappear. She read ahead, wrote detailed notes, asked sharp questions in class, and turned in work that was impossible to dismiss no matter how much certain people wanted to dismiss it. When the first major term results were posted on the board outside the administration hallway, the corridor went very quiet. First position, Zara Coleman. Second position, Jasmine Brooks. Jasmine stared at the board for a full 5 seconds. Then she turned to Zara with eyes that were doing at least 3 different emotions simultaneously. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm going to choose to feel incredible about second place because the person who beat me is clearly operating at a different altitude and it literally doesn't count." Zara laughed. Actually laughed. But when she turned away from the board, she caught the expression on Mr. Lewis's face, one of the senior teachers standing nearby, and the laughter faded just slightly. He didn't look displeased with the results. He looked like someone who had just discovered that a situation was going to require more effort than he'd originally planned. Zara filed that look away, said nothing, turned and walked to class. She had learned, in 18 years of being exactly who she was in spaces that weren't sure what to do with her, that the best response to people who underestimated you was simple. Keep going. Keep winning. Let the scoreboard do the talking. But the storm was still coming. And what was waiting on the other side of it? The cruelty, the betrayal, the moment Zara ended up on her knees in that courtyard under a Georgia sun, was bigger and darker than anything she had walked through yet. Everything escalates. Where the enemies get organized. Where Mr. Morgan has to make a choice that could cost him everything. And where Zara Coleman, brilliant. Mixed race, 18-year-old Zara Coleman from the south side of Atlanta, is pushed to the absolute edge of what she can endure. Zara Coleman had just walked away from Mrs. Patricia Holt with more composure than most adults could manage. She had earned the top position in her class. She had one fiercely loyal friend in Jasmine Brooks. And she had a mentor in Mr. David Morgan who genuinely believed in her. But here's the thing about standing tall when the world wants you small. It makes people angry. And Zara was about to find out exactly how far that anger could go. Because the teachers at Harrington Academy, not all of them, but enough of them had started talking. Not the kind of talking that happens in public. The other kind. The quiet kind. The kind that happens in break rooms and hallway corners and during moments when they thought no one was listening. And Zara, with her scholarship and her test scores and her spine that simply would not bend, had become their favorite subject. It started with small things. Mrs. Holt began assigning Zara lower grades on projects, not dramatically enough to trigger a formal review, but just low enough to sting. A 92 that should have been a 98. An A- on work that Jasmine received an A+ for when it was nearly identical. Zara noticed. She noticed everything, but she said nothing. She kept her head down and she worked harder. Then Mr. Lewis, the short, sharp-eyed math teacher who had looked at her exam results with such visible displeasure, started doing something subtler. He would call on Zara during class, but always with questions one level above what they'd covered. Always just slightly beyond the edge of what she could reasonably answer from the current material. Just enough for her to stumble. Just enough for the class to see it happen. Jasmine caught on faster than Zara did. "That man is setting you up," Jasmine muttered one afternoon as they walked through the hallway. "He's calling on you with stuff from next week's material and then looking all disappointed when you don't get it. That's not teaching, that's hunting." Zara shrugged, though the effort of shrugging it off cost more than she wanted Jasmine to see. "I can handle him." "I know you can handle him. That's not the point. The point is you shouldn't have to handle him. You're a student. He's a teacher. His job is to teach you, not to play chess against you." Jasmine stopped walking and turned to face Zara directly. "This is getting real, Zara. Something is happening and it's bigger than 1 or 2 teachers. They're organized." Zara looked at her friend. She wanted to argue. She wanted to say Jasmine was overthinking it, that people were just being people, that she was fine. But she wasn't fine. And they both knew it. The isolation deepened after that. It's hard to describe what it feels like when an entire institution quietly decides you are the enemy. It's not loud, not at first. It doesn't announce itself with a confrontation or a dramatic moment you can point to and say there. That's where it started. Instead, it's like the temperature drops 1 degree every day. So gradual that you don't realize how cold it's gotten until you're shivering and you can't remember the last time you were warm. That was Zara's senior year. The other students followed the teacher's lead, consciously or not. Kids who had nodded at her in the hallway now looked through her. The table she and Jasmine usually sat at in the cafeteria developed an unspoken time limit. People would join them briefly, but never for long, like lingering too close to Zara might be contagious. And the teachers, some of them, the ones who had quietly aligned themselves against her, became emboldened. One afternoon in October, Zara arrived at her business studies class exactly 2 minutes late. The bus had been delayed. She hadn't been able to help it. She pushed through the door, breathless, and made it to her seat just as Mr. Morgan was starting his lesson. Later that same day, she was walking through the main corridor when Mr. Raymond Cole stopped her. He was standing near the administration office with his arms crossed and that particular expression on his face, the one that suggested he had been waiting for this exact moment and was thoroughly enjoying it. "Coleman," he said. Zara stopped. Her stomach tightened, but her face stayed neutral. "Yes, sir. You were late to Mr. Morgan's class this afternoon. It was 2 minutes, sir." "The city bus." "I don't want to hear about the bus," Mr. Cole interrupted, his voice rising just enough to attract the attention of students passing by. "Late is late. At Harrington Academy, we do not make excuses, we follow rules." Zara said nothing. She could feel the eyes gathering around them like an audience finding their seats. "Kneel," Mr. Cole said. The word landed like a slap. Zara stared at him. "Sir, you heard me. Kneel, right here, right now. And you stay there until I tell you otherwise." The hallway had gone completely silent. Students had stopped walking. Some had their phones out, half hidden, recording. Zara looked at Mr. Cole's face. There was no room for negotiation in it, no space for fairness. He had made his decision, and he had made it with pleasure. She lowered herself to her knees. The floor was cold tile, but outside the double doors the October sun was pouring through the windows, and in 10 minutes it would be hitting directly where Zara was kneeling. She could already feel the warmth building against her back. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15, 20. Students moved through the hallway around her. Most looked away. A few whispered. Nobody said anything. Mr. Morgan's class had ended. She could hear students filtering out, could hear their footsteps and their voices, but none of them stopped. None of them intervened. 40 minutes, an hour, the sun was now directly on her. The tile beneath her knees was warm. The back of her neck was burning. She could feel sweat forming along her hairline. Her legs ached. Her back screamed. But Zara Coleman did not move, did not complain, did not ask to be released. She stared at a fixed point on the floor and thought about her mother. She thought about Linda working 12-hour shifts at Mercy General and still coming home to ask about her day. She thought about the card propped against the orange juice. "Go show them exactly who you are." "I'm showing them, Mom," she thought. "I just don't know if they're watching," but someone was watching. Her name was Jasmine Brooks. And she had been watching for the better part of the last hour, pressed against the window of the second-floor library, her phone clutched in her hand, her jaw tight, her eyes burning. She had counted the minutes. She had watched students walk past Zara without stopping. She had watched Mr. Cole sit in his office like a king on a throne, occasionally glancing out at Zara with that satisfied expression, the same one he always wore when he thought he'd taught someone a lesson. Jasmine had photographed every single minute of it, but photographs weren't enough. She grabbed her bag and ran, not walked, ran down the staircase, through the first-floor hallway, past the science labs, and straight to Mr. Morgan's classroom. He was alone, cleaning the board. When Jasmine burst through his door, gasping for breath, he looked up with a flicker of alarm. "Mr. Morgan," Jasmine panted. "You need to come right now." "What's happened?" "It's Zara. Mr. Cole has her kneeling in the main corridor. She's been there for over an hour." Mr. Morgan's hand stopped moving. He set the eraser down slowly. His face didn't change, not exactly. But something shifted behind his eyes, something that went from calm to cold in the space of a single breath. "Show me," he said when they rounded the corner into the main corridor. Zara was exactly where Jasmine had said she'd be, on her knees, her head slightly bowed, her uniform damp with sweat, the sun cutting through the windows and landing directly across her back and shoulders like a spotlight designed to humiliate. Mr. Cole was standing nearby, leaning against the wall, arms folded. Mr. Morgan stopped walking. He stood very still for a moment. Then he spoke, and when he spoke, his voice was so quiet, so controlled, that it cut through the silence of that hallway like a blade. "Zara." She looked up. When she saw him, when she saw the look on his face, the way he was standing there like a man who had arrived at exactly the right moment and was not happy about how long it had taken, something in her cracked. Not broke, cracked, like a dam that had been holding too much for too long and had just found a hairline fracture. "Up," Mr. Morgan said. His voice was firm. No room for argument. Zara rose slowly. Her legs trembled. She had to press one hand against the wall to steady herself. Mr. Morgan turned his gaze to Mr. Cole. And there it was, the thing that every teacher and student at Harrington Academy knew but rarely saw up close. The full weight of David Morgan's displeasure. "Raymond," he said, just the name. But the way he said it carried enough subtext for a novel. Mr. Cole's expression tightened. "She was late to your class, David. I was enforcing." "She was 2 minutes late because of a city bus schedule she doesn't control," Mr. Morgan interrupted, his voice still quiet, still measured, but with something underneath it now, something that suggested the calm was a choice and the alternative was being deliberately withheld. 2 minutes. "And you had her on her knees for over an hour in the sun, in front of the entire school." Mr. Cole's jaw flexed. "Discipline is my responsibility." "Discipline," Mr. Morgan repeated like he was tasting the word and finding it rotten. "That wasn't discipline, you know what that was, and so does everyone who watched it happen." He turned back to Zara. His expression softened just slightly, just enough for her to see. "Come with me," he said. Zara nodded. She followed him down the corridor, past clusters of whispering students, past open doorways where faces peeked out, past the weight of 100 eyes that had watched her suffer and done nothing. And as they walked, Jasmine fell into step beside her, silent for once, her hand finding Zara's and squeezing. Zara squeezed back. That moment in the hallway changed something. Not dramatically, not in a way you could put on a timeline, but in the way that a crack in a foundation changes a building, slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize the whole structure is no longer sound. Mr. Morgan's intervention was seen as a public challenge, not just to Mr. Cole, but to every teacher who had been quietly working to break Zara Coleman down. He had chosen a side. He had made it clear, without saying it explicitly, that he saw what they were doing and he was not going to look away. The teachers' meetings, which had previously been about curriculum and school policy, began to shift in tone. Zara's name came up more frequently. Mr. Morgan's name came up even more. Mrs. Holt brought it up first, carefully, the way she brought everything up with a veneer of concern. "I'm just worried," she said during a Tuesday morning staff meeting, her hands folded neatly on the conference table. "About the optics of Mr. Morgan's relationship with that student, the closeness, the office meetings, the personal interest. Even if nothing inappropriate is happening, and I'm sure nothing is, it doesn't look right, and appearance matters in this profession." Around the table, several teachers nodded. Not all, but enough. Mr. Lewis leaned back in his chair. "She's been here barely 2 months and she's already getting special treatment, extended deadlines, private meetings, protected from discipline." He shook his head. "That's not fair to the other students." And there it was, the weapon. Not accusations of anything concrete, nothing provable, nothing real. Just the fog of suggestion. The slow, deliberate construction of a narrative that would make Mr. Morgan look inappropriate simply for caring about a student who needed someone in her corner. Mr. Morgan was in that meeting. He sat at the far end of the table and listened to every word. His expression didn't change. His hands didn't move. But his eyes, those quiet, observant eyes that had seen Zara's pain on her very first day and decided to do something about it, they moved slowly across each face in the room. When the talking stopped, he spoke. "If advocating for a student who has been targeted, singled out, and punished unfairly by colleagues in this room, is considered inappropriate," he said evenly, "then I would suggest the problem isn't with my advocacy. It's with the behavior that made it necessary." Room went very still. Nobody responded. But the war had been officially declared. If you're watching this right now and your blood is boiling, mine was too when I first heard this story. And I promise you it gets more intense from here. But before we go further, take a second, share this video with someone who needs to see it. Someone who's been the only one fighting in a room full of people who should have been standing beside them. And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, this is the moment. Do it now. We're not done yet. November brought the first real cold snap of the year, and with it came a shift that Zara felt in her bones, literally. The stomach pain that had plagued her since September, the one that had brought her to the community clinic, the one she'd been managing with over-the-counter medication and sheer willpower, came roaring back with a vengeance. This time it wasn't dull. This time it was sharp and relentless, radiating from her lower abdomen like something inside her was trying to claw its way out. She woke up one Wednesday morning and couldn't stand up straight. Linda found her in the bathroom at 5:30 in the morning, pressed against the wall, her face drained of color, her uniform still half on. "Baby, what's wrong?" Linda's voice was steady, because Linda Coleman had spent 12 years as a nursing aide, and she knew what steady sounded like, even when her hands were shaking. "Talk to me." "My stomach," Zara gasped. "Mom, it hurts so bad. I can't breathe properly." Linda didn't hesitate. She called in to work, helped Zara into the car, the old Honda that made a sound like a tired dog every time it started, and drove straight to Grady Memorial Hospital. By the time they got there, Zara was white as paper. The emergency room moved quickly. Tests. Scans. A doctor whose face went from professional to serious in the span of reading a chart. "Young lady," the doctor said, pulling a chair next to Zara's bed and speaking in that careful tone that doctors use when they're about to change the shape of someone's life. "There's a significant internal issue here. It appears to be a twisted ovarian cyst that's been developing for some time. It needs surgical intervention, and it needs to be soon." Linda's hand found Zara's and held it like it was the only anchor in a room that had suddenly started spinning. "Soon?" Linda asked. "We're looking at surgery within 48 hours. Zara heard the words. She understood them. But somewhere in the back of her mind, past the pain and the fear and the clinical language, a small voice was whispering school. "I'm going to miss school. I just worked so hard to get to number 1. They're going to say I couldn't handle it. They're going to say I fell apart." Because that was the thing about Zara Coleman. Even lying in a hospital bed with a diagnosis that sounded like a verdict, her mind went to the same place it always went. What will they use against me now? The surgery happened 2 days later. It was a success. But success in surgery is a relative word. The doctor was satisfied. Linda was relieved. But Zara's body had been through something major, and the recovery was not going to be quick or easy. She spent 4 days in the hospital. 4 days of IV lines and pale ceilings and nurses who checked on her every few hours. 4 days of Linda sleeping in a chair beside her bed that was clearly not designed for sleeping. On the second night, Zara woke up at 2 in the morning and saw her mother sitting in the dark, watching her with glistening eyes. "Mom," Zara whispered. "Here, baby." "You okay?" Linda reached over and brushed a curl from Zara's forehead. "I'm fine. You're the one I'm worried about." Zara was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made Linda's heart crack clean open. "Do you think they'll let me come back?" Linda stared at her daughter. Her brilliant, resilient, impossibly strong daughter, who had just been cut open by a surgeon and was lying in a hospital bed with tubes coming out of her arm. And her first thought was whether they'd let her come back to the place that had been trying to destroy her for months. "Yes." Linda whispered fiercely. "They will let you come back. And anyone who tries to stop you will have to go through me first." Zara smiled. Then she closed her eyes and slept. She missed 3 weeks of school, 3 weeks, in senior year. With exams approaching and the academic gap widening and every single day of absence being cataloged by the people who wanted her gone. But before Zara could return, something important happened. Linda Coleman walked into Harrington Academy on a Thursday morning, wearing her best blouse and an expression that could have cut glass. She asked to speak with the principal. Dr. Carol Banks received her in the main office, a woman in her mid-50s with silver-streaked hair, designer glasses, and the kind of posture that communicated institutional authority in every vertebra. "Coleman," Dr. Banks said, gesturing to a chair. "How can I help you?" Linda sat. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked Dr. Banks directly in the eye. "My daughter just had surgery," she said. "Major surgery. She's 18 years old and she has been through more in the last 3 months at this school than most people go through in a year." She paused. "I need you to understand something, Dr. Banks. Zara cannot handle any more stress. She can't handle punishments. She can't handle being humiliated. She can't handle being singled out. Even crying could be dangerous for her recovery. I am asking you, as her mother, to make sure she is protected. Doctor. Banks nodded slowly. Her expression was appropriately grave. Of course, Mrs. Coleman, I completely understand. Your daughter's health and well-being are our top priority. I will personally ensure that all of her teachers are informed. Linda studied the woman's face for a long moment, looking for sincerity. She found what she was looking for, or something close enough. Thank you, she said. She stood, shook Dr. Banks's hand, and walked out. And Dr. Carol Banks sat behind her desk, folded her hands, and did absolutely nothing. She did not inform the teachers. She did not send a memo. She did not call a meeting. She did not so much as send an email. The promise she made to a mother who was terrified for her daughter's safety lasted exactly as long as it took Linda Coleman to walk out the door, because Dr. Banks had a school to protect. And Zara Coleman, the scholarship girl from the South Side who had disrupted the ecosystem of Harrington Academy, was not a priority. She was a problem, and problems in Dr. Banks's experience were best handled by being left to solve themselves, or collapse. 3 weeks later, Zara Coleman walked back through the iron gates of Harrington Academy. She was thinner. The color in her face was still recovering. She moved carefully, like she was listening to her body for any sign of betrayal. But her eyes, those deep brown eyes she'd gotten from her mother, were clear and steady. She went straight to the staff room before her first class. Mr. Morgan was at his desk. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway. His expression shifted, something quick and warm passed across his face before his usual composure settled back in. Zara walked in. She didn't think about it. She didn't plan it. She just walked over to his desk and hugged him, the same way she had the first time, the way a student hugs a mentor who has been a genuine lifeline in a place full of people who wanted her to drown. "Good morning, sir," she said quietly. "I'm back, Mr." Morgan held the hug for a beat, just a beat, then patted her shoulder gently and stepped back. He looked at her face, cataloging everything: the weight loss, the careful way she was standing, the brightness that was still fighting to return to her eyes. "Too thin," he said simply. "That's what my mom says too. Your mom is a smart woman." He paused. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Zara admitted. "But better, I'm ready." He studied her for another moment, then he nodded. "All right, go to class. And Zara, if at any point you need to sit down, rest, or leave, you come find me. Understood?" She smiled. "Yes, sir." She turned to leave. Then she paused at the door and looked back. "Mr. Morgan?" "Yeah, thank you for everything." He held her gaze. "You don't have to thank me, Zara. Just keep going. That's all I ask." She nodded. She left, and in the hallway, walking toward her classroom with her backpack on her shoulders and her head held high, Zara Coleman made a decision. She was going to fight, not just to survive, but to thrive. To prove, to every teacher who had doubted her, every student who had whispered about her, every person who had looked at the girl from the South Side and decided she didn't belong, that Zara Coleman was exactly where she was supposed to be. And nothing was going to stop her. But here's what Zara didn't know. What she couldn't know. While she was in that hospital bed, while she was recovering and healing and fighting to get back to school, the teachers at Harrington had not been idle. They had been planning, meeting, building their case, and they had decided quietly, collectively, with the kind of coordination that would have impressed a military strategist, that Mr. David Morgan had to go, not just because of Zara, though she was the catalyst, but because Mr. Morgan represented something dangerous to people who preferred their power unquestioned. He represented accountability. He represented the possibility that someone with authority might actually use it to protect the vulnerable instead of maintaining the status quo. And that, more than anything, was intolerable. The fight that was coming would test everything. Mr. Morgan's career, Zara's resilience, and the question that had been building since the very first day Zara walked through those gates: who truly has the power in a school full of people who have decided you don't belong? Everything breaks, and Zara Coleman finds out what she's truly made of. You do not want to miss it. Let's continue the story. Zara Coleman had just walked back into Harrington Academy after major surgery, thinner, tired, but with her head held high and fire still burning in her chest. She had hugged Mr. Morgan in the staff room, returned to her classroom, and made a silent decision that she was going to fight. Not just to survive, but to win. But what Zara didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the people who wanted her broken had been busy while she was away. and the weapon they had chosen wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed at the one person standing between her and destruction, Mr. David Morgan, and the attack came faster than anyone expected. It was a Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after Zara's return, when Dr. Carol Banks called an emergency staff meeting. The conference room on the second floor of the administration building was full. Every teacher, every department head, every administrative assistant was seated around the long rectangular table. The air carried that specific kind of tension that fills a room when people know something is about to happen, but nobody is willing to be the first to say what it is. Dr. Banks sat at the head of the table. She was wearing her usual armor, designer blazer, silver-framed glasses, expression carefully calibrated to communicate authority without revealing intention. She let the silence build for exactly long enough to make people uncomfortable. Then she spoke. "Thank you all for being here on short notice," she began, her voice smooth and controlled. "I'll get straight to the point. It has come to my attention, through multiple sources, that there are concerns about the nature of a particular teacher-student relationship at this school." She didn't look at Mr. Morgan. She didn't have to. Every pair of eyes in the room found him immediately. Mr. Morgan sat at the far end of the table, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. He had known this was coming. He had felt it building for weeks, in the sidelong glances, in the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms, in the careful distance his colleagues had begun placing between themselves and him. He had watched the architecture of this moment being constructed, brick by brick, and he had made a decision about how he would respond. But first, he would listen. Dr. Banks continued. "Several members of the teaching staff have expressed concern that Mr. Morgan's relationship with a particular student, Zara Coleman, has become inappropriately close, that the level of personal attention, the private meetings, the public displays of familiarity, these go beyond what is expected of a teacher-student dynamic." She paused and looked directly at him now. "Mr. Morgan, I want to give you the opportunity to address these concerns." The room held its breath. Mr. Morgan looked around the table slowly. He looked at Mrs. Holt, who was staring at her folded hands with an expression that might have been guilt or might have been satisfaction. It was hard to tell with her. He looked at Mr. Cole, who sat with his arms crossed and his chin slightly raised, the posture of a man who had been waiting for this moment and was enjoying it thoroughly. He looked at Mr. Lewis, whose eyes darted away the instant they met his. Then he spoke. "Before I address the accusation," he said, his voice steady and calm, "I want to address something that should have been discussed in this room weeks ago and wasn't." Dr. Banks's expression tightened slightly. "Zara Coleman's mother came to this school," Mr. Morgan continued. "She sat in your office, Dr. Banks, and she explained that her daughter had undergone major surgery. She begged that Zara be treated with care upon her return. No punishments, no unnecessary stress. She explained that even crying could endanger her daughter's recovery." He paused. "And then nothing happened. No memo was sent. No announcement was made. No teacher in this room was informed." Silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Banks's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Know about this," Mr. Morgan said, "because I made it my business to know, because someone in this school had to care about that girl's well-being, and it clearly wasn't going to be the administration." Holt shifted in her seat. Mr. Morgan leaned forward slightly. "Now, to the accusation. I have mentored Zara Coleman. I have advocated for her when she was punished unfairly. I have checked on her health when she was sick. I have treated her with the basic human decency that every student in this school deserves." His voice dropped, not in volume, but in temperature. "If that is inappropriate, then every teacher in this room needs to ask themselves what they think this job actually is." Nobody spoke. "But let me be very clear about something," he continued. "I know what is being suggested, and I will not dignify it with a defense because there is nothing to defend. My relationship with Zara Coleman is exactly what it appears to be, a teacher who sees a brilliant, vulnerable student being systematically targeted by people in positions of authority, and who has chosen not to look the other way." He paused. "If that makes people in this room uncomfortable, then perhaps the discomfort is with their own behavior, not mine." Room was so quiet you could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Dr. Banks studied him for a long moment. Then she said, in a voice that was carefully stripped of emotion, "Mr. Morgan, the board's position is clear. For the sake of this school's reputation and the well-being of all parties involved, we are asking you to create distance between yourself and the student in question." If you are unable or unwilling to do so, we will have no choice but to terminate your employment and revoke all positions you currently hold. There it was, the ultimatum, clean and sharp as a guillotine blade. Mr. Morgan looked at her. He looked at the faces around the table, some avoiding his gaze, some meeting it with defiance, a few looking genuinely conflicted, and then he said the thing that nobody in that room expected. "Then I resign." The words landed like a bomb. Mrs. Holt's head snapped up. Mr. Cole unfolded his arms. Mr. Lewis's mouth actually fell open. Even Dr. Banks, who prided herself on being unshakable, blinked. "I would rather walk away from this school," Mr. Morgan said, rising to his feet, "than abandon a student who needs protection. If that's the choice you're giving me, if it's my career or my integrity, then the answer is simple." He pushed his chair back. The scraping sound cut through the silence like a knife. "Choose integrity." Every single time. He turned toward the door, but before he reached it, he stopped. He looked back over his shoulder. "And for the record," he said quietly, "the fact that not one person in this room stood up to defend that girl, not one, says more about this institution than anything I could ever say." Then he walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam, and the conference room sat in stunned, suffocating silence. Zara found out that same evening. She was in her bedroom, sitting cross-legged on her bed with a textbook open in her lap when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jasmine. "Call me right now." "It's about Mr. Morgan." Zara's stomach dropped. She called immediately. Jasmine answered on the first ring, her voice tight with a combination of anger and disbelief. "Zara, listen to me carefully. They held a staff meeting today about you and Mr. Morgan." "About what?" "About everything, the mentorship, the closeness. They told him he had to stop or they'd fire him." Zara's hand went cold around the phone. "And what did he say?" Jasmine was quiet for a beat. "Then he told them he'd resign." Bedroom went very still. Zara heard the words. She understood them. But understanding and processing are two very different things, and right now the gap between them felt like a canyon. He can't do that," Zara whispered. "Jasmine, he can't leave because of me." "That's exactly why he's doing it, Zara, because of you, because he won't let them win." Zara pressed her hand flat against her chest. Her heart was hammering so hard it hurt. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. The walls of her bedroom, small, familiar, safe, suddenly felt like they were closing in. "Have to talk to him," she said. "Zara, I have to talk to him right now." She hung up before Jasmine could say another word. "Now pause right here, because I need you to understand something about this moment." Zara Coleman was 18 years old. She had been through more in the last 4 months than most people go through in 4 years. She had been humiliated, isolated, punished, hospitalized, and systematically targeted by people who were supposed to be educating her. And through all of it, one person had been her constant. One person had stood in the gap. One person had looked at her and said, "I see you, and you matter." And now that person was about to walk away, not because he wanted to, but because standing beside her had cost him everything. So when Zara picked up her phone at 11:30 that night and called Mr. Morgan, yes, it was late, and yes, she probably should have waited. She wasn't thinking about rules or propriety or what it would look like. She was thinking about the one person who had made Harrington Academy survivable and the thought of facing that place without him. He answered on the third ring. His voice was tired but alert, the way people sound when they haven't been sleeping and weren't going to. "Zara, it's late." "I know," she said, her voice was shaking. "Sir, I heard what happened. I heard what you said in that meeting." A long pause. "Then who told you?" "It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that you can't do this. You can't resign because of me." "No, listen to me." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through it. "You are the only reason I have survived that school. The only reason. Without you, they will destroy me. Not maybe, not probably, they will." She pressed her fist against her mouth to stop the sob that was building. "Please don't leave. Please, I can't do it without you there." "Mr." Morgan closed his eyes on the other end of the line. The guilt hit him like a wave, heavy, cold, relentless. He had been so focused on standing on principle, so determined to make a statement, that he hadn't fully considered what his absence would mean for the one person he was trying to protect. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. Zara wiped her face roughly. "Stay," she said. "Please just stay. I don't care if we have to create distance. I don't care if we can't talk every day. I don't care if they watch us like hawks. Just be there, be in that building. That's all I need, just knowing you're there." Line was quiet for a long, heavy moment. Then Mr. Morgan exhaled. "Okay," he said. Okay, Zara, I'll stay. But the damage was already deeper than either of them knew. Because the next morning, Zara woke up and could not get out of bed. Not physically. Physically, she was recovered enough to function. But something inside her, the engine that had been running on fumes for months, the internal machinery that had kept her going through the bullying and the surgery and the isolation, had simply shut down. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her school uniform hung on the back of her door. Her backpack sat packed and ready on the floor. But when she looked at them, she felt absolutely nothing. No motivation, no determination, no fight, just empty. Linda knocked on her door at 7:15. Zara, baby, you're going to be late. Silence. Silence. Linda opened the door. She found her daughter lying in bed, eyes open, face blank. Not going, Zara said. Linda frowned. What do you mean you're not going? I mean, I'm done. The words came out flat. No anger, no tears, no defiance, just done. Like a switch had been flipped and the light behind her eyes had gone out. Linda sat on the edge of the bed. She reached for Zara's hand. Talk to me, baby. What happened? Zara didn't look at her mother. She stared at the ceiling and spoke in a voice so small it barely qualified as sound. Trying to get rid of Mr. Morgan, because of me, because he stood up for me. She swallowed. And I just keep thinking maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong there. Maybe it would be better for everyone if I just stopped. Linda Coleman's heart broke in her chest. Not cracked, not fractured, broke, clean in half. She squeezed her daughter's hand. Zara Coleman, you look at me right now. Zara didn't move. I said, look at me. Slowly, Zara turned her head. Her mother's face was wet with tears, but her jaw was set like iron. You belong everywhere you choose to be, Linda said, her voice trembling with fury and love in equal measure. No school, no teacher, no institution gets to tell you otherwise. I didn't raise a quitter. I raised a fighter. And the girl I raised doesn't let small people with big egos define her future. Zara's eyes filled. But Mom, no buts, I hear you. I hear that you're tired. I hear that you're hurting. And I am sorry, I am so sorry that the people who should have protected you became the people who hurt you. Linda's grip on her hand tightened. But you stopping, you giving up, that doesn't fix anything. It just lets them win. And baby, she leaned closer. They do not get to win. Okay, if you are watching this right now and you are not feeling something, check your pulse. Because this right here is the moment where everything turns. Everything Zara has been through, everything she's endured, everything that's been done to her and around her and against her, it all comes down to what happens next. So before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. Share this video. Right now. Send it to someone who is going through their own Harrington Academy, whatever that looks like for them. Someone who needs to hear that giving up is not the answer. And if you're not subscribed yet, honestly, what are you doing? Hit that button. We're in the final stretch and you need to be here for this. Zara didn't go to school that day, or the next day, or the day after that. 1 week became 2. 2 became 3. 3 became a full month. Linda tried everything. Encouragement, firmness, gentleness, tough love, nothing worked. Zara had retreated into a place that Linda couldn't reach, a quiet, still, hollow place where the girl who had once burned with ambition now simply existed. She stopped studying. She stopped eating properly. She stopped calling Jasmine back. She spent her days in her room, sitting on her bed or standing at the window, watching the world move without her. And every night, every single night, she thought about Mr. Morgan, about whether he was still at the school, about whether the teachers had gotten what they wanted, about whether he thought about her the way she thought about him, not romantically, never that, but with the desperate, aching gratitude of someone who has been drowning and remembers the exact hand that pulled them out on the 28th day. Linda Coleman hit her breaking point. She sat at the kitchen table with her phone in her hand, staring at a number she had saved but never called. She had gotten it from the school directory weeks ago, back when she'd first gone to see Dr. Banks. She had kept it, not knowing why, just instinct. She dialed, the phone rang 3 times. Then a voice answered, calm, measured, familiar, even though she'd never actually heard it before. This is David Morgan. Linda closed her eyes. Mr. Morgan, this is Linda Coleman, Zara's mother. A brief silence. Then Mrs. Coleman, is Zara all right? Linda laughed, a bitter, exhausted, humorless sound. No, Mr. Morgan, she is not all right. She hasn't been to school in a month. She barely eats. She barely speaks. She just sits there like someone turned off the light inside her. She heard him exhale on the other end, heavy, pained. No, you and I have never really talked, Linda continued, her voice cracking. And I know the school has opinions about your relationship with my daughter, but I need to tell you something, Mr. Morgan, and I need you to hear me. I'm listening. My daughter is not in love with you. She is not infatuated with you. What she is, what she has been since the day she walked into that school and you were the only person who treated her like a human being, is attached to you. The way a child gets attached to someone who makes them feel safe in a place that isn't. Linda's voice trembled. I know what that looks like from the outside. I know what people say, but I am her mother and I know my child. And what she needs right now, what might be the only thing that brings her back, is for you to come here and talk to her. Silence on the other end was long, very long. Then Mr. Morgan said, Tell me when. He came on a Saturday afternoon. Linda opened the door and found Mr. David Morgan standing on the porch of their small South Side apartment in a button-down shirt and pressed slacks, holding a small paper bag. He looked different outside of school, less formal, more human. The authority he carried in the classroom had softened into something quieter, something almost gentle. Mrs. Coleman, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for having me. Linda shook his hand. She studied his face, looking for what she wasn't entirely sure. Sincerity, maybe, or confirmation that this man was who her daughter believed him to be. She found it. Come in, she said. The apartment was small but clean, warm. The kind of home that didn't have expensive things but had love in every corner. Mr. Morgan noticed the photographs on the wall, Linda and Zara at a park. Zara as a little girl, gap-toothed and grinning. Zara in her Harrington uniform on the first day, looking nervous but proud. He stopped at that last one, looked at it for a long moment. She earned that uniform, he said quietly. Yes, she did, Linda replied. They sat in the living room. Linda offered coffee. He accepted. And then, for the first time, they really talked. Mr. Morgan told Linda everything. The first day in his classroom, the birthday, the knock that he still regretted, the juice from his refrigerator, the empty seat that bothered him. The way Zara's mind worked, sharp, independent, hungry for knowledge. The teachers who couldn't stand that she was better than their expectations. Mr. Cole and the kneeling in the hallway. Mrs. Holt and the whisper campaign, the staff meeting, the ultimatum, and his decision. Want you to know, he said, looking Linda directly in the eye, that my interest in your daughter has always been exactly one thing, the same interest I would have in any student who was being failed by the system that was supposed to protect her. Zara is brilliant. She is brave. And she deserved better than what Harrington gave her. My only regret is that I couldn't shield her from all of it. Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she wiped her eyes and said, I believe you. 3 words. Simple, heavy. Enough, can I see her? Mr. Morgan asked. Linda nodded. She's in her room, she probably won't come out on her own. Mr. Morgan stood. He walked to Zara's door. He knocked twice, firm but not aggressive. Zara, it's Mr. Morgan. Silence, then movement, footsteps. The door opened slowly. Zara stood there, and Mr. Morgan had to work very hard to keep his expression steady. She was thinner than the last time he'd seen her. Her curls were pulled back carelessly. Her eyes, those bright, determined eyes that had been the first thing he noticed about her, were dull, exhausted, empty. She looked at him like she wasn't sure he was real. She whispered. Yeah, he said. It's me. And then Zara Coleman, the girl who had refused to cry in the courtyard, who had stared down Mrs. Holt without flinching, who had walked back into school after surgery with her chin raised, crumbled. She pressed her hands over her face and sobbed. Deep, heaving, broken sobs that shook her entire frame. Mr. Morgan didn't move to hug her. He didn't reach out. He simply stood there, present, steady, real, and let her feel what she needed to feel. When the sobs finally slowed, he spoke. Zara, I need you to listen to me very carefully. His voice was calm, unhurried. The same voice that had said don't make yourself small for anyone in that room on her very first day. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be hurt. You are allowed to take a breath, but you are not allowed to quit. She looked up at him, her face wet and raw. You are one of the most brilliant students I have ever taught, he continued. And I have been teaching for 15 years. The people at that school who tried to break you, they didn't do it because you were weak. They did it because you were strong. Because your existence in that building challenged everything they wanted to believe about who belongs and who doesn't. He paused. You belong, Zara. Not because I say so, not because your mother says so, because your work says so, your mind says so, your results say so. He held her gaze. Don't let them take that from you. Don't give them the satisfaction of watching you disappear. Room was very quiet. Then Zara took a breath, a real breath, the first full one she'd taken in weeks, and whispered, Will you still be there, at the school, Mr. Morgan looked at her for a long moment. I withdrew my resignation, he said. I'm not going anywhere. Something moved behind Zara's eyes, not joy exactly, not relief, something deeper, something that looked like a person remembering who they were after a long time of forgetting. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll come back." Monday morning. 7:45 am. Zara Coleman walked through the iron gates of Harrington Academy for what felt like the 100th time and the first time simultaneously. Her uniform was freshly pressed. Linda had stayed up past midnight making sure of it. Her backpack was packed. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She had eaten a full breakfast for the first time in weeks. She walked through the front doors, down the main corridor, past the spot where Mr. Cole had made her kneel, past the staff room where Mrs. Holt's door was closed, past the notice board where her name had once sat at the top of the class list. Students looked at her. Some whispered. Some stared. A few looked away. Zara didn't look at any of them. She looked straight ahead, and then a voice, loud, bright, and completely lacking in subtlety, rang out from the end of the hallway. "Zara Coleman, you absolute legend." "You're back." Jasmine Brooks was running toward her at full speed, arms outstretched, face split into the widest grin Zara had ever seen on a human being. The impact of the hug nearly knocked Zara off her feet. "Don't you ever disappear on me like that again," Jasmine said into her shoulder, squeezing so hard Zara's ribs protested. "I have been eating lunch alone for a month, and it has been the most tragic experience of my entire life." Zara laughed. It came out rusty and slightly broken, like an engine that hadn't been started in too long, but it was real. "I missed you too," Zara said quietly. Jasmine pulled back, held Zara at arm's length, and studied her face with the intensity of a doctor performing an examination. "You look terrible." "Thank you. I mean it in a loving way." "I know," Jasmine grinned. "Now come on, we've got a whole school to remind that Zara Coleman doesn't stay down." And that's exactly what she did. The next 8 weeks were the hardest of Zara's academic life, and that's saying something for a girl who had studied for exams from a hospital bed. She was behind, significantly behind. A month of absence in senior year was a hole that most students would never climb out of, but Zara Coleman was not most students. She stayed late every day. She arrived early every morning. She filled notebooks with notes so detailed they could have been published as textbooks. Jasmine studied beside her, matching her hour for hour, refusing to let her friend work alone. Mr. Morgan checked in periodically, but from a distance now, the way they'd agreed. A nod in the hallway, a brief word after class, nothing that could be photographed or whispered about or turned into ammunition. It was different from before, less warm on the surface, but underneath, the same steady current of support ran unbroken. And the teachers, they watched, they waited. Some of them, Mrs. Holt, Mr. Cole, Mr. Lewis, expected her to crumble. Expected the month of absence to be the final nail in the coffin of her academic career. They were wrong. When the final exam results were posted, the last results of senior year, the results that would determine class rankings and college transcripts and everything that followed, the corridor outside the notice board was packed. Students crowded around, pushing forward, craning their necks, scrolling down the list with their fingers. And there it was, right at the top. Exactly where it had been at the end of last term. First position, Zara Coleman. Second position, Jasmine Brooks. The hallway went quiet, then Jasmine screamed. Actually screamed, a full, unrestrained, echoing off the walls scream of pure delirious triumph that made 3 freshmen jump backward in alarm. "That's MY best friend," she yelled, pointing at the board. "That is MY best friend right there. First place, after surgery, after a month off. First place." Zara stood beside her, staring at the board, her hand covering her mouth. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She just stood there, tears running silently down her face, and smiled, because she had done it. Not for Mr. Morgan, not for her mother, not to prove anything to anyone. She had done it for herself. Graduation day arrived in June, wrapped in warm Atlanta sunlight and the smell of freshly cut grass. The ceremony was held on the main lawn of Harrington Academy, white chairs arranged in neat rows, a temporary stage erected at the front with the school crest displayed prominently behind the podium. Parents, families, friends filled the seats. Linda Coleman sat in the 3rd row, wearing a navy blue dress she'd bought specifically for today, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes already glistening before the ceremony had even begun. The students filed in, caps and gowns flowing in the early summer breeze. And when the time came for the valedictorian to speak, the name that was called over the loudspeaker settled across the crowd like something inevitable. Valedictorian this year, graduating with the highest academic distinction in her class, Zara Coleman. The applause began immediately, but it wasn't just applause. It was something else, something with weight and meaning. Teachers clapped. Students clapped. Even some of the faces that had once been hostile looked different now, complicated, uncertain. Maybe even a little ashamed. Zara walked to the podium. She adjusted the microphone. She looked out at the crowd, at the rows of faces, at her mother in the third row with tears already falling, at Jasmine in the second row grinning so hard it looked like her face might split in half. And somewhere in the back, standing against the far wall where he could see everything without being the center of anything, Mr. David Morgan stood with his arms folded across his chest and a quiet, private smile on his face. Zara took a breath. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she began. Her voice was clear, steady, carrying across the lawn without effort. And I don't mean that in the motivational poster way. I mean literally. There were people in this school who worked very hard to make sure I wouldn't be standing here today. People who decided before they knew my name that I didn't belong. The crowd was very still. Mixed race, I'm from the South Side. I got here on a scholarship, not a legacy, and for some people in this building that was enough. That was all they needed to know about me. She paused. They decided I was a problem before I ever opened my mouth. Silence. Heavy. Real. But here's what I learned this year, Zara continued. The people who try to make you small, they're not doing it because they're strong. They're doing it because your existence makes them feel weak. And that's not your problem, that's theirs. A murmur moved through the crowd. I also learned that you don't need 100 people in your corner. You need one, maybe two. You need that one person who looks at you when the whole world is looking away and says, I see you, and you matter. Her voice wavered for just a moment before steadying again. I had that person, and I wouldn't be standing here without them. She didn't look at Mr. Morgan. She didn't need to, he knew. So to every student sitting here today, and to every person watching who has ever been told they don't belong somewhere, I want you to hear me. She gripped the edges of the podium with both hands. You belong, not because someone gives you permission, not because the door opens easily, but because you walked through it anyway, because you earned it, because you refused to let the people who were supposed to lift you up be the people who held you down. She looked at her mother. Linda was openly crying now, one hand pressed over her heart. Mom, Zara said softly into the microphone. Thank you for never letting me quit, even when I really, really wanted to. A wave of emotion moved through the crowd, laughter and tears mixed together. Zara straightened her shoulders one final time. My name is Zara Coleman. I'm valedictorian of Harrington Academy's class of 2024, and I belong here. Applause that followed wasn't polite, it was thunderous. Students rose to their feet. Parents stood. Even the teachers, most of them stood. It was the kind of applause that doesn't come from obligation. It comes from recognition. From the collective realization that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, not the speech itself, but the girl who delivered it. The girl who had survived every single thing this place had thrown at her and still found the grace to stand at the front of it and speak with strength instead of bitterness. Zara stepped back from the podium. She walked off the stage and straight into her mother's arms. Linda held her so tightly that Zara could feel her mother's heartbeat against her own chest. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Then Linda whispered, I am so proud of you, baby. So proud. Zara closed her eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt completely, entirely, overwhelmingly at peace later. After the ceremony, after the photographs, after Jasmine had forcibly dragged Zara into approximately 47 selfies, Zara found herself standing alone near the oak tree by the school entrance. The same tree where Mrs. Holt had confronted her all those months ago. She heard footsteps. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Valedictorian, Mr. Morgan said, his voice carrying that familiar mixture of calm and warmth that she had come to associate with safety itself. Zara turned. She looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had given her a bottle of juice on her birthday. The man who had walked into a hallway and told her to get off her knees. The man who had almost sacrificed his career to defend her. The man who had shown up at her apartment on a Saturday and reminded her who she was when she had forgotten. Thank you, she said simply, for everything, Mr. Morgan looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. You did this, Zara, not me. I just made sure nobody put the fire out before it could burn. She smiled. That's a pretty good thing to do. It's the only thing worth doing, he said. They stood there for a moment, teacher and student, mentor and mentee, two people who had walked through a storm together and come out the other side, and the silence between them was the comfortable kind. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then Zara extended her hand. Mr. Morgan looked at it. Then he shook it, firm, warm, final. Not a goodbye, just an acknowledgement, a closing of one chapter and the opening of another. "Go be brilliant, Zara," he said. She grinned. "That's the plan." And with that, Zara Coleman turned and walked through the iron gates of Harrington Academy one last time. Into the sunlight, into the future, into a life that was entirely, unapologetically, unquestionably hers. Now I want to leave you with something, because this story isn't just about Zara Coleman. It's about every person who has ever walked into a room and felt the air change. Every person who has been brilliant in a place that didn't want them to be. Every person who has been told in words or in silence that they don't belong. The lesson is this. The world will try to define you by the things you can't control. Your race, your background, your family's bank account, the neighborhood you come from, the way you look when you walk into a room full of people who don't look like you. And some of those people will try to use those things against you. They will build systems designed to keep you in the place they've decided is yours. But here's what they don't understand. You are not what they say you are. You are what you prove yourself to be. Not once, not twice, but every single day. Through the pain, through the isolation, through the moments when quitting feels like the only sane response. You keep going, you keep working, you keep showing up, and you let the results speak louder than the whispers, because in the end, the scoreboard doesn't lie. Zara Coleman walked into Harrington Academy with nothing but a scholarship and a mother who loved her. She walked out as valedictorian, not because the system helped her, not because the path was easy, but because she refused, absolutely, stubbornly, magnificently refused to let anyone else write her story. And neither should you. This is where we end. But before you go, if this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own battle, if it made you think of someone who needs to hear it, share it. Send it to them right now. And if you've been watching this whole series without subscribing, I'm going to need you to fix that immediately. Hit that subscribe button. Ring the notification bell. Because stories like this, stories about real strength, real resilience, real people fighting real battles, this is what we do here. Every single week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, you belong everywhere you choose to be. The end.